Hi, and welcome to our video on creating assembly simulations and exploded views using DELMIA. This video is going to give you some new tools that you're going to be able to use to display and communicate information about your model. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to use this sample model of a UAV drone, and we're going to go ahead and add a simulation to this. So the first thing we need to do is I need to move from assembly design into my DELMIA app, which I find in the south side of this compass. And it's going to be right here at the top, right here, Assembly Evaluation. I'm going to switch over to that app. Send me into here. And then the next thing that I need to do is I need to add a simulation object to my tree. That's the object that's going to get saved into our collaborative space. So I'm just going to come up here to Add, New Content. And in this menu, I want to scroll down and find Simulation Meta Modeler. Here it is. This menu right here, you're going to want to drop down that menu and look for Manufacturing Simulation and click on that. And that's going to add that to that tree. It's also going to send us into the Simulation Toolbox, which is going to change some of this display. Alright, so that's added these two windows. If you don't see this one on the right over here, it just looks like this little camera button here to bring up this right menu here. Now this one on the left shows a little bit of information, or will show a little bit of information about the behavior that we're putting into the simulation. But right now I really want to just see the tree. So to do that I'm going to hit F3 on my computer, and that's just going to open up that tree, and it just toggles it back and forth. Alright, so now you can actually see in here we have the simulation right here. We have the model, which is defining right there all of our parts and everything, and scenario, which is going to include all of the motions that we put our parts through. So let's go ahead. I'm gonna rename this. I'm just gonna call this Assembly Simulation. And that might be important because that is what you have to find in your collaborative space if you want to bring the simulation back. It's not going to come up automatically if you open your part again in assembly design. You have to look for this object, that assembly simulation. That's why I rename it. And now we're good to start adding some movement to this drone. So what we're doing with the assembly simulation is just animating the process of taking apart or putting together our drone, and it can run in either direction. All that I need to do to get started is I'm going to select a part or a couple of parts. I'm just going to grab this wing for now and come down here to the simulation box and go to New Track. I'm going to select New Track, and it's going to pop up two things. This orange thing, which is called the robot, is what I pull on to rotate or pull on a part. And then this little bubble window gives me the buttons that I need to actually save, record, or modify my tracks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this out first thing. There it goes. And I'm going to hit record, this button right here. And I'm going to pull it up. And I'm going to hit record again. So now if I run this simulation, and down here this little play box popped up, I can actually watch it come out and move up. And notice it moves first in one direction and then in the other because I recorded twice during that process. So that looks good. I can actually come over to the other wing. If I select that and add a new track, I can do the same thing. There we go, same thing. Move it over, move it up, but since I didn't hit record in between, it's a diagonal line now. And so I would have to come up here and hit record to get that to move along that line. But I'm going to move one step beyond that. I'm going to hit cancel. I'm going to grab more parts in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down my control key, and I'm just going to select individual parts that I want to move. And good practice is to start with the smallest part and work my way up. Right click. So I'm holding down control, that's left click on that, and then that control arm, the control surface, and the wing. And now I've selected that whole kind of sub-assembly there. And now I go new track, and I'm going to do that same motion. Zoom out a little bit, same motion, pull it out, pull it up. Now I'll hit record, and now it will move just in one motion, and it's that whole sub-assembly moving. Looks like I left the servo behind, but we're okay with that for now. And there we have two different animations, and I can always just double click on this, come back in, and we can watch it again. I can even watch it backwards. I can watch it in a loop, or even I can watch it go front to back, so it's going to go up and down. And it will keep doing that if I let it. Just going to leave it in one direction, there we go. And I can even, if I come in here, I'm going to hit OK, it also shows these little arrows in the middle of the track that's showing the direction. If I click on that little arrow, I can reverse the track. And now if I come in and hit play, forward direction is opposite. So now it's assembling the drone instead of disassembling that. That's one way to turn that motion around. We'll look at some others further on in the video. Okay. All right, so, but we don't want to have these as separate motions, so we're going to combine these into one assembly sequence. So what I need to do is create that assembly sequence down here at the bottom, this button here. It's going to add an assembly sequence into my scenario section right there, and it's going to pop up a Gantt chart for me to work with this. Initially, when I create an assembly sequence, it's going to be blank, so I need to actually add those tracks into it. So all I do is I right-click in the Gantt chart or in the tree, go to Add Existing Activity, and then it's going to let me select one of these tracks to add. And I could do that over and over again. I could right-click, Add Existing Activity, Track 1, right-click again, Add Existing Activity, Track 2. But I can be a little bit fancier than that. I'm going to come up here to this blue kind of bag-looking thing called Control Mode. I'm going to click on that, and that's going to let me now hold down Control, select Track 1, and Track 2, and then I can select this little green Finish button, and it will add both of those in sequence in my Gantt chart. So it's assuming I want to see one followed by the other. Let's give this a try. I can grab this red line, and if I drag it over my actions, I'll actually watch them in motion. We can see them moving. It looks like they're even bouncing off of the plane because I've got one moving in reverse. And as soon as I wiggled that red bar at all, I got this little play box down at the bottom again, so that I can actually run through my animation that way. Now those are moving a little bit slow. I could shrink these down just by grabbing on the edge of their little hexagon to make them move a little bit faster. And let's even say that we don't want them to move in sequence. I can right-click on that little arrow, that dependency right there, and just say Delete Constraint, and it will move this second item down to the front. I'm going to shrink that a little more. And now that's set up to run at the same time. Now, with the assembly sequence, it automatically saves this, but it doesn't always update right away, so sometimes it's good practice after I've made these changes. If I want to run through it, I'm just going to go ahead and close the Gantt chart, and then come down and double-click on it in the tree again. And now, wiggle that red line a little bit, and I can hit play, and they'll run at the same time. Alright, now that was pretty simple. Working with two objects makes that pretty easy for us, so let's make something a little bit more complex. First thing that I'm actually going to want to do is I want to save this state. I don't know why I would want to state with one wing off and one wing on, but I'm going to do it anyway. And the idea is a saved state creates kind of a saved state kind of creates a point of reference for me to return to. It's going to remember where my parts are right now. One of them's off, one of them's on. And this way we can jump really quickly between our nominal state, where we started, and any one of our exploded states or viewpoints that we want to use. So I'm just going to say wing off on this. Great, and now I can actually, if I double click on nominal state, you can see that pop on and pop back off. I'm going to leave it on for now. Alright, let's try something a little bit more complex. Okay, I'm going to create a couple of motions here for this tail assembly to come off. Now I could pull both of these screws off at the same time, and I probably would want to normally, but I only have a few parts to work with here, so I'm going to do them one at a time. Pull that down, hit record, hit OK, grab the other one, new track, pull it down, record, hit OK, grab this guy, new track, pull it down, record, and OK. Now there are some control rods connected to control horns back on the back of these. Let me see if I can get a view of them. Alright, on these control horns. I'm not going to worry about that connection for now, just to save time, but I am going to bring those control rods with me. So again, holding control, I'm going to click on both of these control horns and the control surfaces and the wing itself. And we're going to say new track, and now I'm just going to move the whole thing back. The assembly sequence doesn't really pay attention to whether or not I'm moving through another material, so you're going to want to keep an eye on that as you put this together. And there we go. I have now 4 actions there. So let's do what we did before. New assembly sequence. Right click on that, add existing activity. Control mode, this little blue bag here. And because these are created in order, I have that first assembly sequence up here, and it's separating those last 4 parts, which makes it really easy for me to come down and grab them. This time I'm going to hold Shift and select track 3 and track 6. It's going to grab everything in between and hit OK. And there we have that assembly sequence in series. Alright, so let's go ahead and let's try watching that. I'm going to move that around a little bit and just hit play. And there you see, that's the first screw. Second screw comes down. That base plate comes down, and then this whole section can just slide off. And that's our sequence. Alright, let's say now, for some reason, I want this plate and this wing assembly up here to move off the boom at the same time. Well, we can go through the whole same process I did before. I know this last action was that big tail assembly here. So if I come in here and right click on this and delete that constraint, notice it didn't jump back 1 level, it jumped all the way back to the beginning. And that's not exactly where I want it. I need to recreate a dependency with this last action here so that I get it to move in the step I want it to. And the way to do that is you go over and you grab this little hexagon and you look for that kind of scroll up and down cursor. And I'm going to drag that right on top of that hexagon before it. And that's going to create a parallel dependency. If I hold it after, it's going to recreate that dependency it had before, and I can drag it before to force that big tail assembly to come off first. I want them in parallel, so I'm just going to release there, and there's that parallel dependency. Again, just to make sure I update, I'm going to quit out of that. I'm just going to double click on this again. And now we can watch that whole process go in one. So there's 1 screw. Alright, there's a second screw. And here go the plate and the assembly, both at the same time. And we've created those dependencies. And really, that's all you really need to know for creating assembly sequences and assembly simulations. Obviously, this would be a little bit more of a complicated system if you were doing it for your entire model. A lot of the time, what you want to do is just disassemble individual sub-assemblies to keep the animation a little bit shorter. But let's go in and let's look at what else we can do with this tool. So I'm going to go ahead and quit out of this Gantt chart. Just for kicks, just to be able to remember this, I'm going to go back and create a new simulation state. These are always a smart idea to just create a good reference point to come back to. Tail disassembled. Okay. And now that's been added, so I can jump between any one of these just by right-clicking. And notice it recreates my viewpoint as well. And that's an important factor of these states. So make sure you have that viewpoint. If it matters to you, make sure you have that viewpoint where you want it. Alright, so I'm going to jump back to the nominal state, and now we get to take some time and look at exploded views. Now, as we've seen already, we can move these parts off of each other. And technically, I could go through the entire process of drawing each individual track to create an exploded view and get everything where I want it to be. But we can do this a lot faster too. This is a powerful tool for that. I'm going to come down here and do this automatic explode tool, which is going to automatically create this view for me. So the first thing it needs to know what model I'm exploding, and that's going to be the whole drone. And then it needs to know one item in the model that's going to stay stationary. Everything else is going to move away from that one. And I'm going to grab the fuselage body here. You could grab the boom or one of these other plates. I just like using the body for this. And then I'm not going to hit OK. I'm going to hit apply. Just clear that message. And by doing that, we get to see where it places all of those parts after it's reached that exploded view. And we can kind of decide on some of these. I could hide some of these items if I don't want it. That's actually a wire that's running down the boom that I probably don't need. There's even a wire system all the way up here. Depending on how I want to use it here, I can kind of hide some of those items. And what's even more important, I can move these to exactly where I want them to. Notice this is pretty far extruded. There's an item all the way up here and an item all the way down here. But we can take this time before we've actually hit OK to go through and move any one of these parts to a better position. So maybe I'm not happy with these wings. One of them seems higher than the other. I can move that up. And that's just going to redefine what that track was going to be. This fuselage kind of cockpit part there, I can move back. The tail, maybe the tail's too far back. And I can reposition the parts until I get everything where I want it to be for the exploded view that I want to generate. And once I'm confident with all of those and I'm ready to accept those changes, there's a few more things I want to look at. The first thing is the scroll bar, which actually lets me see what an animation of that explosion would look like. So I can drag it back to the first and all the way to the end. Second thing I want to do is I want to hit this Generate Assembly Sequence button. And that's going to be important because without it, you're not going to be able to animate the explosion. If you don't care about the animation, then you don't necessarily need the assembly sequence. You can just save the state and you'll always be able to jump back to that. Just make sure you save the state, because otherwise, once you've jumped to nominal state, you would have to go through this whole process of exploding and repositioning parts again. Alright, so I'm going to hit OK, and we're going to accept that as our exploded view. Notice, as soon as I hit OK, that was when it went through and actually drew out all of these tracks to make them part of the assembly sequence that I can now animate. There's a lot of tracks in this process, but now I can bring it up and I can run this just like the other assembly sequences, however I want to do it that way. Alright, let's say now that we made a mistake. We repositioned parts, and after we created it, we realized, okay, no, this part isn't actually where I want it, or one of the tracks I drew wasn't quite what I'm happy with. We don't have to go back through and redo the whole process. All I have to do is come down and grab any one of these tracks. I'm going to double click on that boom movement to activate that. And what I want to do is I want to move where the boom ends up. And this is kind of an important aspect of this. It repositions the boom at the start of its path. And if I were to move it now and then hit modify for that path, it would actually change the starting position. So the first thing I need to do is make sure I get it to its ending position. And now what I can do is draw a new track. So I'm going to move it up. And notice what it tries to do is it wants to add a second step to that track. So now it's showing it moving all the way down and then up a little bit. So instead of hitting record, I want to come in here and hit modify. And that will just move that endpoint up instead of creating the second path. And now I can have it in a bit better of a position, however I decide to do that. And in addition to that, I could actually come in here and just delete the track if I decided I don't really need to see the boom move off of that fuselage. Anyway, so I'll go ahead and hit OK. We'll accept those. And now we have all of those positioned and ready to go for our exploded view. I can create a drawing with this. I can use the simulation and use the animation with this, and just move on from there. Now there's two other things I want to do before we look at the drawing. I'm going to create a new state again. It's just always good policy to keep creating these states so I can quickly jump between those and create whatever views I need. I'm going to call that one exploded and add that to my list of states over here. And the second thing is, if I wanted to show this to a sponsor or something, those track lines are kind of ugly. They kind of get in the way and they're distracting. There are a handful of ways to get rid of those tracks, but by far the easiest one is to simply come in the menu, select the first one, hold shift, select the last one, and hide them. And now all of those vanish. Notice these are still here because that's not part of that assembly sequence. They're up here at the top. Same down here, that's that tail disassembly sequence, and I could hide those as well. And with that, we've covered everything we need to know about animating explosions or animating assembly or disassembly sequences. So let's move on and talk about exploded views. So to do this, there's a couple of things that I need to add to my tree to get the actual exploded view to show up on paper. If we're okay just taking a rendering of this, then that's fine, but I want to put this in a drawing right now. So we need a couple more things added to our tree. So the first thing I need to do is I need to get back to the drone. So I'm just going to select on this tab here, which is going to send me back to that original view of just the assembly. Notice it updated the position of all the parts because it remembers the state that I'm in. And I'm going to right click on that Drone 2 object and go to Insert, Drawing. It's going to add that to the tree. I'm going to rename that in its Properties menu. Assembly Drawings. That's good. And then the second thing is called a markup. The markup is what holds the parts in such a way, in their positioning, and in such a way that it can be transferred onto a drawing. So this is just exploded. And that's going to get added to my tree as well. And notice it has this little red circle that's showing it's the state that's active right now. It has two things, slides and notes. We're just going to add one slide to this markup to get it ready to go. And that's the only thing that we're really going to have to worry about in here. Alright, so let's go get that slide. For this, we actually are going to move into a new app, but we really only need one button from this app. So I'm going to come up here to the top of the compass, and we're going to scroll down and look for Design Review. It's this one right here. I'm going to switch into this app, and all we have to do, we make sure that that exploded markup is active, and we come down here and just say Create Slide. And it's going to add that slide to that markup, and that's basically just taking a snapshot of where all the parts are at, remembering the distances between them, and all of that so that we can create that exploded drawing in our drawing package. So we've basically got everything we need from here, so we just have to jump over to the drafting tool, and to do that I'm just going to double click on the drawing. Now I'm only really going to gloss over the most important things you need to know to create an exploded view in this. We have another video that includes more details on drafting, so make sure you look at those for the rest of these tools. I really quick want to just make this look like a set of engineering drawings, so I'm going to come to Page Layout, and I'm going to accept these templates. You could add other templates or other standards depending on what you're drawing with. And I'm just going to hit this little draw button here. It's going to throw that border on, and we'll throw in the title block down there. Okay. I'm not going to worry about editing the title block and whatever because we're covering that in our drafting video. But now we are ready to add a view. And we can add whatever kind of view we want. I'm going to add an isometric view instead of a side view here. So I'm going to select isometric. And now we're free to jump back over to the assembly and pick our view. So I can select the drone. And now what it needs is it just needs a plane so that it knows what set of planes I'm using as my central set for this model. So I'm going to come into my wireframe, here it's called skeleton, and just select one of those planes, and it's going to create that view. Alright, first thing that you should notice is it's wrong. It's the assembled view, and that's not exactly what we were going for, but that is still the process of creating this. And the reason why is because I didn't use that slide that I had placed within the markup. But before I go back and do that, I'm going to make sure that this is the right size. So I'm going to click out of it, and that's going to accept that as the object I want on this drawing. And then I'm going to right click on that border, come to Properties, go to View, and I'm going to change this scale. I think I need to change it 1 to 3. Make that fit on our paper here. And there we have the first, that will just be our first basic drawing of the overall drone. It's maybe still a little bit small on this page, but I could make it a 2.5 scale or whatever I want to do there. And I'm going to add a second page for my exploded view. So I'm just going to come up here, hit that plus, and I can even rename these if I want. This is going to be assembled. I'll call it assembly. Double click on this, exploded, and I could add other pages if I wanted to this drawing package. However I want to organize that. In fact, I could add a different set of drawings under each of these parts to keep that organization working in my tree, so that under each of these little blue chairs would hold all of the information, including the drawing for each of those parts. That's also an option for organizing these drawings. So here I am in the exploded drawing, and let's import that geometry. So same process, isometric, come back over to the assembly, and this time I'm not going to select on this guy up here. I'm going to come down and select the slide. And then it needs me again to pick a plane, XY, and there is my exploded view. Again, everything is kind of present, including the wiring. I could have hidden that if I wanted. In this case, I'm okay with it, so click outside. And again, we're going to make it fit. Say 1 to 4. Close enough. And there it is within my drawing. Of course, close enough won't be good enough if you're using your actual model, but here you get the idea. Alright, so that is essentially it for creating the exploded view. One other thing I'm going to add in here is the automatic bill of materials. And 3DEXPERIENCE comes with a great tool for that. So I'm going to go to Annotation, I'm going to come down to this Table tool, click on the drop-down menu, and just go to Bill of Material. It's going to ask for a style. Default's okay for me. And then I just have to select a place on the drawing. I just clicked up there, and there it is. Now this is B-size paper, so it looks a little bit small how I've got it right now. But there I see the name of each of my parts. Now in my model, that's essentially the name that I have saved. If I come back here, even though it's using this as the title of each of these parts, if I come into any one of these, I can right click on it, go to Properties, and we can see the title is what I can change and is what shows up in here. But every part also has a name automatically associated with it that also kind of defines where it fits within our collaborative space and ensures that it's always a unique name for all of the parts. And that's something that we actually can't change in here because it's so ingrained in how the data finds that part. And so I have two options over here in the drawings. If I'm not happy with this name within my table, first thing is I could double click on this and I could go through and change each of these part by part. Now of course that's a little bit tedious, so let's do a little bit better than that. I'm going to go to Properties, right click Properties, and now I'm going to go to Reported Properties, and it's going to give me a list of everything that's showing up in this table. And I can just come down to any one of these. I'm going to come down to that name, external ID item here. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, and in this property drop-down list, I'm going to go down and search for title. And let's see, title, there it is. Hit apply, and there it goes. I'm going to hit OK. All of the titles for all of those parts instead of the ID. Now beyond that, you might want to go through and annotate each of the individual parts with item number callout, and that you can just do down here in one of the text options. So if I go down here, I can do a text with a leader, and I could just go to any one of these parts, click on it, click out, and add a number. Of course, that might be a little bit tedious as well, so there's one other option, and it's included in here with the bill of materials options are balloons. Which are the same basic principle. I can come down here, pull that out, and now I've created a balloon object for that item. Now it assumed 25 for that object. Now I can just click off to say OK, and notice for every balloon I create, it's actually conveniently going to automatically try to assign those numbers to the numbers in the table, which is even more convenient than these little leaders out here. And I can also double click on this if I want to keep the tool active. Starboard wing, it's going to automatically call that 33, and just to check, 33, there's the wing. So the balloons even speed up this process more. And of course, if I deactivate this, I can always come in and edit the properties of any of these balloons to get a better font or text. All right, and that covers everything you need to know about assembly simulation and drawings. Thank you.